The Black College Football Player of the Year watch list has been revealed, and we have the snubs and the headliners. But some of these snubs are egregious. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, when you bet on the Super Bowl winner, you get bonus bets every single time that team wins a game in the regular season. Go to FanDuel.com/locked on. Today's episode, we'll wrap up with Norfolk State and Grambling State and how they fared in their trip to Puerto Rico. I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek. It was pretty successful. But we start off the show with a two-part, a double feature. You know, I love the movie analogies. We're going to keep the movie references going, and we're going to focus on the Black College Football Player of the Year watch list. We have the headliners, but first I have to start off with these snubs because these snubs are egregious. I wouldn't have it any other way. I just sat here and I said to myself, this is an extensive list. Nearly 50 players on this list. Hear me again and hear me good. Nearly 50 players on this list. That makes that different. See, if this was a list of 5, 10, maybe even less than 20 players, and you had to split it across 4 conferences, maybe these snubs wouldn't be so egregious. I would likely still have some of these snubs, but maybe I wouldn't consider it so egregious. But when you have 50 players and it's a large list, then it's like, okay, if I have players who I feel like completely should be on this list, and I'm questioning why they aren't on this list, as if it was, I'm not going to say common sense, but I would say popular opinion, that these players belong on a list like this, now it feels like, dang, what are we seeing differently? Now, when I give these snubs, I need you who may not agree with the player that I say. You might feel like this player isn't this, or you might feel like the player isn't that. I don't know how you personally feel. You need to remember we are not talking about players being able to win the award. I know that might sound backwards. When you say we're talking about an award watch list, but the players on there don't have to really be in consideration for winning the award. There's 50 players, I think 49 to be specific. 49 players on this watch list. I can guarantee you that about half of them do not stand a chance at winning this award. I don't even have to call out any names in particular, but I will call out a couple that I don't think is disrespectful. You have 2 kickers on this list. Let's keep it transparent. 2 kickers on this list. You have a center on this list. A kicker and a center are not winning the Black College Football Player of the Year, yet they are on this watch list. So don't tell me that really being a serious contestant is a prerequisite for being on this list, because it isn't. Those positions alone tell you that it isn't. This is just a highlight of some of the best players, and I feel like you're missing some of the best players. Now, I could have went a couple of different ways, because I think there's quite a few players who I would have added on this, almost to the point where if you really trusted in those 49 players, maybe you got to bump this up to 60, 75 players on the list, because I'm just going to take the chance to highlight some of my SWAC guys and defensive guys. But there's some offensive players that could have been here, especially some offensive players from the MEAC. But instead, I'll go with the SWAC in the defense, and that is Isaiah Major and Lewis Matthews. Because they're both linebackers in the SWAC, I'm going to combine them, but I will address specifically Major individually. because Major is the leader of that defense. Major is the face of that defense. I can make an argument. I know that Kamari Stevens was highlighted. People look at All-American. I still felt like Isaiah Major was the face of that defense. I truly did. I think that he'll be the leader. He'll be the most vocal player on that defense. And I think he's going to be the next star on that defense. He came over from community college last year, and he was one of the best linebackers in the SWAC. I expect that to happen again. I know that most people don't want to feel like he's in that could be the best echelon, but when I watch him, I'm thoroughly impressed, and I do believe that he has the opportunity to kind of make a name for himself as the best linebacker in the SWAC this year. I'm not saying he's there right now, but I do see the talent for him to be able to take a step up and become that in 2023. And most importantly, he's the leader of the defense. The reason I stress that is because that's the one thing that Lewis Matthews doesn't have going for him. He's kind of in the shadow of Sundiata Anderson. That being said, they said that two legends cannot coexist. Or they act like two legends cannot coexist. Please don't take my Cold World card. But that's how we're doing here. Just because Sundiata Anderson is on the defense doesn't mean that Lewis Matthews can't be incredible as well. He was one of the best tacklers in the SWAC. You look at both Matthews and Major, not only are they getting tackles, because sometimes it can be risky to scout based on box score, but when you can't watch every single game, certain times you do it. But I think that tackles for a loss are one of the more, I would say, secure stats to look at the box score, because I don't believe you luck into a tackle for a loss. I don't think it's possible. I think every single tackle for a loss, it might fall in your lap, but there was a certain amount of skill that required you to get there. So that's how I view it, especially from the linebacker position. You had to come downhill, and both of those guys are really good at doing it. The next player is Esaias Guthrie, the safety from Jackson State. And this is just one of the guys who it kind of confuses me how people talk about him, or more so how they don't talk about him. I remember when he went to Jackson State, it was a big deal for a couple of reasons. One, it was a big deal before he transferred because of what he was able to do in Delaware State. So it wasn't as if, he transferred to Jackson State and Mouth of the South. You know that the Jackson State fans are very vocal when they like somebody. Maybe that's kind of skewing your point of view. No, Esaias Guthrie was a big deal before he ever transferred into the SWAC. I remember him coming off of his freshman year at Delaware State, and he was on Senior Bowl Watchlist. He was on all of these things where people really valued him. And when he did transfer to Jackson State, it was a big deal, partially because he had a podcast tour that we were a part of. Matter of fact, I'm going to tag that. I think this is the way to do it. Yeah, that's the way. So I'm going to actually put that video up right here. But it was a lot of fanfare around his decision to go to JSU. And then as time has gone on, of course, that fades away because, I don't know if there's any transfer that anybody's talking about for 6 months in a row, especially not one that isn't a quarterback. Maybe a quarterback transfer gets consistently discussed, but not a safety. That being said, you're getting closer to the season. I would have thought I would have heard Esaias Guthrie's name said a little bit more. That's a tad bit confusing to me. So to see him not on this list kind of just continues, not to see him on this list continues my trend of confusion, because I don't understand what happened to the fanfare. Are we holding the fact that he sat out a year against him? I don't think I would. I am really looking forward to what Esaias Guthrie brings to Jackson State in 2023. And then my last guy, and he's my only non-SWAC player, but I've kind of been on this guy's bandwagon for a little bit, and that's Karon Prunty. So he doesn't fit the SWAC category, but he does fit the defensive player category. He's been an all-conference player at North Carolina A&T the 1 year he was there. He was a Kansas Big 12 He was a all Big 12 conference honorable mention at Kansas, and he was one of the best freshman defensive backs in the country on an FBS level. He hasn't skipped any time. What is the reason that we aren't at least thinking that he could be on the watch list? I understand it's difficult for these positions to do it. This is an offensive-driven award. A defensive player has never won this. A quarterback, a running back, and a wide receiver have won it. A defensive player has never won it. I understand that this is a difficult award for defenders to win, but you have defenders on the watch list. Karon Prunty, Esaias Guthrie, Lewis Matthews, Isaiah Major. Those are all players who are deserving to be on this watch list. I'm not going to take an opportunity to knock anybody down. I don't care who's on that list that I may or may not agree with, but I do feel like those 4 need to be on there. At the worst, take this list from 49 to 53. But they didn't. And of the 49, there's 3 players who I truly believe are the headliners. And I'm going to use a little bit more versatility, and I'm going to keep it on the offensive end because I got love for my offensive players too. And I'll show you why as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. And one of the coolest things that FanDuel is doing right now is if you put a preseason bet down on who you believe the Super Bowl champion will be, you get rewarded throughout the season every single time that team wins a game. That means you can pick the sorriest team in the world. You can pick the Atlanta Falcons if you wanted to. And every, 1 or 2 of the weeks throughout the year that the Falcons do happen to win, you'll actually get the bonus bets for those weeks. Yes, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be one of the best teams in the NFL. You could pick literally the bottom tier of the NFL, like I just gave the example of. But either way, go to FanDuel.com/locked-on, and that is a cool treat. Pick a successful team like the Kansas City Chiefs, Cincinnati Bengals, right? Let's pick teams like that and go ahead and get your money back every single week. Bonus bets. Go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. It's written down there below, and your success is written in the stars. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. On tomorrow's episode, Everydayers, we have our final feature Friday before we get into our game of the week Friday. And on that feature Friday, we'll be discussing North Carolina Central's Hall of Fame class. However, we're still here on a Thursday, no feature today, but we will start our Black College Football Player of the Year headliners with North Carolina Central quarterback Davius Richard. I told you we're going to stick with the offense this time. We're going to have a little bit of versatility, and we're not going to stick with one conference, but we will stick with the offensive guys because those are the players who are most likely to win this award. That's why they are the headliners. But you look at Davius Richard, if they were to just say, we're sticking with one guy, we're going to say this is our preseason Black College Football Player of the Year, that guy will be Davius Richard. And because that is unquestioned, that is the truth, he is the headliner of this watch list. Simple and plain. This is the headliner of the watch list. I think he will be the most discussed player in Black college football this year. I think he will be the player probably with the most. Yeah, I had to think about it for a second. He will be the player, in my opinion, with the most eyes on him. There'll be teams with more eyes on them, but I think that North Carolina Central quarterback himself will be the player with the most eyes on him. And I've done an episode, tag again. Yep, we're going to tag it right there. We're going to try to make sure that we call back to episodes and then put them in the YouTube video. So the name of that video, I think that might have been the same one that Karon Prunty was involved in. But the name of that video was The Only Thing Missing from Davius Richard's Resume is a Black College Football MVP. Ironic, right? And here we are today. That's the only thing missing from the resume, and I think he's perfectly set up to get it. Now for my headliners, I'm going to move into the CIAA. I'll go to Jada Byers because Jada Byers was absolutely fantastic last year. And honestly, I think he had a player of the year type season in 2022. The only thing working against him is the fact that Jackson State went undefeated and Shedeur Sanders was a monster, right? It was those two things together. Definitely. More so Shedeur being a monster, but the undefeated really kind of sealed it. It was like, all right, we're not budging off of this. But overall, so I look at Jada Byers, and he had a legitimate record-breaking season in 2022. His name is now, this is a season that will go down and be well remembered in Virginia Union history. Now, if he just could have been against anybody else, we might have seen him be the first D2 player to win this award since Amir Hall in 2018. Actually, he'll be the only other player other than Amir Hall. He did in 2017 and 2018, and no other D2 player has won that award at all. in the lifespan of this award. So I think that Jada Byers had that kind of year, and we'll see what he can do this year. I think he deserves to be a headliner. I think that if he can come close to that, it'll be a serious conversation, because that's very rare to do what he did. And for him to do it 2 times deserves some sort of national big time acclaim. He was already graded the best player in the state, so he deserved that. Now, the other player, and we're going to go back to the SWAC, and that is Jarveon Howard. And I think Jarveon Howard is a player who, honestly, the running back position is stacked. I could have named guys like Jared Hunter, could have named guys like Mookie Collier. Those are 2 of the MEAC offensive players that I thought about in the first segment that were snubbed. I even named them, right? You still have guys like the Texas Southerns returning their running backs, Southern Universities returning their running backs. Like, this is going to be extreme. Howard has multiple running backs, not just Jared Hunter. I think that the running back position is actually going to be extremely exciting in Black college football this year. It's something that you should genuinely watch, because there's so many talented running backs and so many running schemes that you need to be on the lookout for. But when you look at Jarveon Howard, back to him specifically, he was the leader in the conference in rushing yards. Many people feel like he is a potential All-American in 2023, and he's explosive. I think he'll have better boxes in front of him this year as long as the offensive line is blocking well. I think he'll have better better holes and better running opportunities in front of him with better quarterback play, which I think that Alcorn will have. I think that this guy is in line for an absolutely special season. So shout out to Jarveon Howard, because he, Byers, and Richard are all the headliners. Even if I want to say Richard is the headliner, all 3 of these guys are the headliners of this Black College Football Hall of Fame or Black College Football Player of the Year watch list. One last thing before we move off of this list. I think it would be really cool to see conferences adopt this format. Yes, you're going to have the preseason Offensive Player of the Year. Let's just do that, because these are all offensive guys. So you're going to have an Offensive Player of the Year. Every OPOY is not as cut and dry as Davius Richard. Like, the MEAC knew it was Davius Richard. It wasn't so cut and dry that it was going to be Jeremy Musa. Maybe it's going to be Jarveon Howard. Maybe it's going to be Andrew Body. But you know what would be interesting? If you then took the Offensive Player of the Year and said, we're going to have a 5 to 7, maybe even 10 maximum player watch list and attach it. So you have the Offensive Player of the Year and then 9 guys underneath him that kind of form a watch list. I think that'd be really cool. You don't lose anything, because you're still labeling a player of the year. It's not exactly like this, but you're taking and kind of incorporating certain aspects of it. You're incorporating the list aspect, but you're still going to have the definitive winner of the preseason award that you do every single year at Media Day. We're all about change and innovation here on the Locked On HBCU podcast platform. So listen to me, SWAC, MEAC, any conference that's listening, do yourself a favor, help the fans out, give yourself a player of the year, but then also give me 3, 4, 5 other guys who could have won this award, and help us be a little bit smarter fans and know who to look out for. But one thing you need to look out for is Grambling and Norfolk State coming back, because they went to Puerto Rico and they had a really, really good performance. And we'll break down how successful they were as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. And Grambling and Norfolk State performed extremely well in their exhibition match against the LBP. That is the Liga. I forgot what the B stand for, but basketball. Of course, it's basketball. Liga Basketball. Forget it. I should have wrote it out again, but I don't have it. And I don't feel like it was said Liga Basketball Puerto Rican. I don't feel like that is actually what it's called. But overall, the LBP, the Puerto Rican Basketball Association out there, the basketball league out there, and they're all stars. So they went out against a trio of LBP All Stars, the red team, the white team, and the blue team. And we talked about this about 2 weeks ago with Grambling and exposing the brand and how they were continuing to do that. I won't tag that because we're now hearing. I've already tagged 2 things. And honestly, I already forgot what the first thing was. The Esaias Guthrie interview. If I don't write this down now, I will forget it. So the Esaias Guthrie interview is what we did. Need to tag Guthrie and Richard. Y'all seeing the mind of a guy who overall just needs to do these things. I was going to call myself a name on here, but I'm not going to do that. Anywho, the exhibition games have came and they have gone for Norfolk State and Grambling. And I thought that both teams performed really well. You know, Grambling ended up going 3-0. Norfolk State went 2-1. You can look at these games on Facebook. I don't know. The commentaries in Spanish is not really my cup of tea. Honestly, maybe you could listen to yourself an album. I don't know. Maybe, you know, today is what? Today's Thursday. If you check it out tonight around 11, new music will have dropped. I don't know. You can either, or you can listen to the commentary in Spanish. In the words of the Boondocks, the choice is yours. I don't know what you want to do, but overall, Grambling went undefeated, and they knocked off the red team, the blue team, and the white team. Meanwhile, Norfolk State only lost to the white team. But with Grambling, you had Kentavious Dozier, who led them 22 points against the blue team, 20 points against the white team, 18 points against the red team. And he had 3 steals in their first matchup of that trilogy. So you're looking at a player who was extremely consistent, averaged 20 points, was a high scorer each time, was the leading scorer in 2 of the 3 games. And the other one, I think it was Jordan Smith, had 26 points. So, and that was when, I think that was when Dozier had 20 against the white squad. Yeah, that was. I think that was their first matchup. So that was a really good game. And, you know, this is important because they have new faces and they're getting to know each other. And that's the same benefit that Norfolk State had. And Norfolk State really needed it because they're missing their big duo of Bankston and then also, why did I just catch a brain fart? Bryant. Bankston and Bryant. I told you, you see that brain fart I had right there is the exact reason I had to write down. I ain't playing my phone right here. I had to write down exactly what it was that I needed to tag because I will forget if I didn't. But the duo of Bryant and Bankston is now gone. So they need to learn each other. And in that, they went 2-1. One aspect that I thought was really consistent was their ability to shoot from 3 and their ability to rebound. Now, the rebounding was one guy. That was Tyrell Bladen, and he had rebounds throughout his whole trip. But the 3-point shot, maybe it was a coincidence, but it seemed to be a big part of their ability to win. And in the 2 games that they won, they had a score with 15 points in each. Or excuse me, had a score with 15 points in the first game, and that was Daryl Anderson, and 12 of his points came from 3-pointers. So he knocked down 4 threes. And then you had another game where you had Tyrese Jenkins, who he knocked down 4 threes in the game, and he ended up having 20 points. So overall, both of these players have 4 3-pointers in a game, and in both of those games, they ended up coming up victorious. Once again, the game is on Facebook. You can go to the LBP Facebook page. Grambling has it. You have to scroll for a little bit, but Grambling did have the game. That's how I had to go find their stats. Like I had to go to the game. I had to go to the end of the game and find out what were the numbers because I couldn't find Grambling's numbers anywhere. But you put in that work, you go, and luckily they had somebody who seemed like they had one guy who was speaking in English and one guy who was speaking in Spanish, but was able to bounce back and forth. But like I said, the only team that the Spartans lost to was the white team, the white All Stars, and that was obviously the best team. They were the only ones who scored a victory. Grambling, that was the only team that Grambling didn't beat by 20 or more points. They beat them by only 8. So that was clearly the best squad. But overall, I think that this was a good showing for both Grambling and Norfolk State. It allowed them to get a little bit of practice in before actually going to, winter workouts and things of that nature, because their season, it's kind of hard to believe, but basketball season starts in November. We don't really pay attention until the top of the new year. Now, ironically, or maybe conveniently, their conference schedule always starts after the Celebration Bowl. But yeah, they're about to go into workouts very, very soon. So good showing for them. I appreciate you for showing up, and I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. I truly do appreciate that. Now, on tomorrow's episode, we'll have our last Feature Friday of the year. So shed your tears, but don't worry. Football is here. Feature Friday is only going to be replaced by Game of the Week Friday. So with that being said, I appreciate you making this your first listen of the day every day. In the meantime, in between time, until next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.